Hello. Today we'll talk about two important topics that people usually confuse. They're two important roles in any helping profession. It's mentoring and supervision. This is the suggested reading for this lecture. Here are the learning outcomes which you can go through. So we're going to talk about the one-to-one support that has variety of forms like mentoring, supervision, coaching that occurs throughout medical education, medical career cycle. It is very, very, very important and crucial part of learning, and also it offers the safe space for reflection, which is important in the learning process, and also it helps in motivation and keeping practitioners and also decreasing burnout. Let's start with mentoring. Mentoring is a form of relationship that usually occurs between a more experienced person that offers support to another. It's very important to remember it's a two-way process. It's not only the mentor lecturing the mentee, it's both the mentor and mentee working together in a safe environment, and also both of them benefit from this process. It helps the mentee develop and practice some skills such as communication and empathy, and it models it in a way, and also it models a supporting relationship and experience of working together. Its goal or aim is to build confidence of the mentee and also encourage independence. So through mentoring, we're not trying to encourage dependence or reliance. No, it's gradually giving the mentee the space to lead and be confident in the skills and in communication. Having a mentor or being mentored can be a very rewarding experience. I remember during my doctorate, I got the opportunity to be a mentor to one of the students that is a first year student. And it was a great space where I can offer what I've learned or the process that I went through or use my resources or connections to help the first year student. And we'll talk more about this as we move forward, how to be a student mentor. Here's some examples of people reporting how rewarding the experience was. It was a great to talk to someone who had been in my situation before and knew how I felt. Also, during student life, we do feel stressed, and it is nice to know that somebody is there for us and that this person is really committed to helping us. Someone that cares. So, who's a mentor? A mentor can be a senior student, as I was to a mentee. It can also someone that's doing a job that you're aiming for, or someone that's specialized in an area you want to specialize in, someone that graduated from the same course and we can help you in that course, someone who's want to share their knowledge or want to share their insight or willing to invest time and energy in this mentoring relationship. So, simply put, anyone can be a mentor. You don't have to be perfect, you don't have to know everything to be an effective mentor. You have something to offer. So, it might be skills, might be your character, the way you approach things, your thinking process. Though anyone can be a mentor, there are qualities that make you a good mentor, especially in medical education. Very, very, very important. You always have to create the space to reflect on your own role, reflect in general. You need to create that space. Have good interpersonal skills, being be able to make the other person feel heard and seen. Modify your teaching strategies to meet the mentee's needs. Not all people that you're gonna be a mentor to have the same needs or learn the same way. Knowledgeable in the area you want to talk about, have the skills that are needed, and of course, who does not want an enthusiastic mentor? Genuinely enthusiastic. It's not like a mentor that's keep watching the time or like, okay, we're done. Oh, let's change the schedule. It's not like it's one more task. Also, creates a non-threatening learning environment. You don't want to feel threatened while learning. You don't want to feel like, oh, if I say something wrong to my mentor, I'm going to lose grades or he's going to think less of me. It needs to be a non-threatening, a safe environment, and also not judgmental. Also gives constructive feedback. It's not the feedback that will tell you, oh, you've not been doing a good job. A feedback that you know that when it's communicated to that person will benefit from. It's either showing them what areas they need to work more on by guiding them through it, giving them resources, working together, and something that benefits, always focusing on how can I best benefit my mentee. And of course, enhancing knowledge and skills. Oh, two lines under fear. Mentees should be able to express themselves without fear. And this is very important, especially if they can come and express to you that, hey, this has not been working. I don't learn, this is not the best way I learn through. Creating that safe environment will be beneficial and supportive. The mentee also has responsibility in the mentor mentee relationship. As we explained earlier, it is a two-way process. Both as the mentor needs to dedicate time, the mentee also needs to dedicate time and commit to that time, and also manage the relationship with the mentor and lead in managing the relationship and contact with the mentor. In other words, as we explained previously, if something is not working, it is the mentor. The mentorship relationship is the space for the mentee to best benefit, either enhancing a skill, knowledge, etc. So the mentee should be able to come and tell the mentor, this has not been working, in a respectful way, engage in conflict resolution with the mentor. Um, just remember, it's a two-way process. It cannot be the mentor leading and the mentee is following. This is the place where to learn skills of taking initiative, being independent, and being confident as a mentee. There are many benefits of having a mentor for a mentee. Help to develop skills by either observing, practicing. It helps in building confidence, discussing your feelings or expectations and anxieties. Just that space that holds all of that. It helps to network, make new contacts, gives you insight into different roles, organizations, specialization, things you might not have thought about, or ideas or thoughts you want to process further. It helps you access information. It's very beneficial in many, many ways. So, benefits of mentoring to the mentor, it helps him or her practice and improve their personal and communication skills. It provides that sense of inner satisfaction that as a mentor you've helped another student or another person, and it comes out of social responsibility, making a difference to your time and difference in someone else's life. And of course, you can always add it into the CV. Mentoring takes different forms and shapes. If we want to talk about the steps of mentoring, for example, learning a skill, usually the mentor does the task first, the mentee watches, learns, then they do the task together, and then the mentee independently does the task, and the mentor watches and offers feedback, and then the mentee does the task without needing the feedback. We spoke earlier about peer mentoring. It's essentially a program where a group of students will volunteer and be trained to be student mentors. And usually they mentor students that are in earlier years, and they link them to a small number of students, either one, two, three, a very small number. And the role of the peer mentor is to offer practical help and advice to new students and act as a referral point to different resources, services, or contacts. So, how does peer mentoring works? It's very straightforward. Usually the peer mentor receives training on common issues or concerns that will come from mentees. There's no set time commitment. It's something that both the mentor and mentee agree on, and the relationship will last as long as the relationship is helpful to the mentee. It does not have to be formal, and it's not expected to take the place of any professional staff or supervisors. And that's it. A psychologist developed a theory, he called it the experiential learning cycle. The idea behind it is that if we do something or have an experience, it is enough, it's not only enough to promote learning. When we learn something, we need to become conscious of what we learn and we engage in reflection, reviewing, analyzing what happened or what we have done. Um, and we start to consider different things, concluding. And this is where we learn from the experience in the generalization stage. And then we take it to another level where we start planning or trying out what we have learned and actively experimenting. And then this goes back to the experience, whether it's a similar experience, a new experience, and the learning keeps on happening in more of a cyclical mode. Let's move on to talk about supervision. Supervision is one of those things that everyone that is practicing needs, whether you're a senior, whether you're a consultant. It's that encounter, whether formal, informal, hierarchical, non hierarchical, part of a training program or outside. It's that encounter that enables you to have that safe space that you feel able to bring things into and process and reflect on. It helps you develop yourself further. It facilitates learning and seeing things from a different perspective. It's that regular and structured and extended encounter that's aimed at reflecting on casework. So, why supervision? Of course, in the medical field, as other fields, things have shifted in the way they perceive teaching and learning. And now they're recognizing the importance of one on one supervision. It has changed from the past, where it's more informal, more not fixed, more flexible. It leaves space for the supervisee to bring in whatever they want to discuss. It gives them the freedom to bring in whatever they want to bring in. And it's more organized in a way where each person recognizes their role and each one committed to the process. To continue on why supervision, now there's more emphasis on adult learning and taking responsibility and accountability for your own learning. It shifted from traditional teaching, and also it provides the space for reflection rather than sitting and waiting for someone to feed you everything. So, one of the benefits of supervision also is to have that space where you can make it yours to work for you. It has shown that it helps in decreasing symptoms of burnout and levels of stress. There are different ways or different reasons for that. Um, it helps you to reflect and be in a process of always self renewal, developing the resources you have within, the resources you have from out, to make use, to take autonomy in your learning and autonomy for your well being. Also, it helps inspire you to find that passion where you can be curious, be okay with making mistakes, taking risks, being vulnerable. It says here that good supervision, we believe, should allow for a two-way flow in which both supervisor and supervisee are responsive to each other's input. Supervision, therefore, becomes a dynamic learning and developmental process in which both parties learn and grow together, which is very important to keep in mind. And also, it allows you to always be in touch with what you need and what's the best way that you learn. Um, and when we talk about emotional well being, it's good to remember that though it creates that space and awareness, it also gives you the opportunity to work on what you need to take care of yourself instead of being reactive. Creating the space where you work on your self care practices and managing your feelings, and also finding a group of people that you can use as engage in a mentor and mentee relationship, colleagues, where you find yourself being able to process things with them that happen um, at that space or in that environment. And of course, always make sure to have appropriate kind of supervision that works best for you. To be more specific, when we talk about supervision in healthcare, it can take a variety of forms. It can be either clinical supervision or educational supervision. For example, clinical supervision, when I did my doctorate, I used to do practicums and internships, and in each placement, I used to have 2 hours of supervision, individual supervision, and 1 hour of group supervision. And that space we used to use for professional development and also to monitor my performance and to make sure that my training and my practice is up to the standards of the American Psychological Association standards for trainees. Sometimes the elements of professional development or performance monitoring might be something that you agree with the supervisor explicitly, and sometimes it just happens implicitly, where you will see these developments happen through the supervisor and supervisee relationship and not something that you stated you want to work on and then you consciously worked on to achieve. Supervision can occur either formally or informally, or in my case, it was mandatory during my training, or involuntary, like voluntary, where you say, "Hey, I want to have supervision," and sometimes it can be between peers or hierarchical on a hierarchical basis. As we discussed earlier, supervision in healthcare contains two elements: it's development or performance, or both. Depending on the context and the agreed relationship between the supervisor and the supervisee. Some supervision is entirely about development or mentoring. In other cases, it's entirely about performance or remedial supervision, where there are some concerns and you need to monitor and work on that person's performance quality. In most cases, the circle overlaps to a greater or lesser extent. As we discussed earlier, there is no learning that happens without the opportunity to reflect and analyze and bring the experience into the conscious to engage with it. So, in supervision, we can say it's an intelligent conversation with a colleague about a case or issue, but a big part of supervision is reflective practice, where you have that intelligent conversation with yourself. So they overlap and they support each other, both supervision and reflective practice. There are three functions for supervision. First, development, where the supervisor focus on helping the supervisee on developing their skills and understanding themselves further and their capacities. And the second function is resourcing, where the supervisor assists the supervisee in dealing with the impact of working with clients, such any feelings that the client brings within the supervisee, or any feelings and heaviness or distress or confusion that the supervisee is working with and through with the client. And the third function is the quality. Though the supervisor is not the line manager, they have a responsibility to ensure that the work of the supervisee is up to standards and meeting the ethical requirements of the organization. So, in more detail, the developmental function is very important in developing the supervisee's skills and understanding of their capacities. It is done, as we mentioned before, through reflection, curiosity, exploration, non judgmental environment. It helps the supervisee understand their clients better, become more aware of how they bring themselves to session, aware of their reactions and the responses, understand more the dynamics that occur between them and their client, and also explore other ways of working with the client and reflect on different methods and how can they approach things differently. This is a very important function of supervision. It's resourcing, and it has been found that this really helps with decreasing symptoms of burnout and improving the supervisee's well-being, because it provides the supervisee with the space where they become aware of how working with the client is impacting them, and how they choose to respond. Um, Sometimes they choose to respond to feelings of distress or pain or fragmentation from the client by denying or stating that they're not affected by the stress of the client, or sometimes they become overly empathic with the client, and how can I explain it? It is good to be empathic, but sometimes it's not being empathic. It is feeling like if the client is sad, you're sad. If the client is happy, you're happy. It's like your emotions are enmeshed with the client. Or sometimes the client re-stimulates the supervisee, or triggers the supervisee in a way that they're not aware. They're not choosing the responses. They're reacting. It is very important to have that space where you become aware of those emotions and what the client elicits in you. It decreases, as we said, burnout, and makes the supervisee more effective in their work and not defensive or reactive or over identify with their clients. Um, that's it. The third function of supervision is qualitative function. It's not necessarily about one not having a sufficient training or experience. Sometimes we're just humans and we have some blind spots, or a person can have areas of vulnerabilities, things that they're not aware of they bring to their practice. So it is the responsibility of the supervisor, especially when the supervisor is working with people, to ensure that the standards of the agency are being met, and also that the supervisee has and understands and acts based on ethical standards. There are different types of supervision. We're going to talk about them later on in this presentation. The informal one, where it occurs from its name, it's like it happens spontaneously, where someone could tell someone about something. There's the clinical, where it's more common in medical practices. The educational, which usually happens where you assess learning needs and review progress. There is remedial, where an agency requires an assessment and retraining of someone that were concerns about their performance. There is professional, where supervision happens between two professionals. And there's managerial, where it's carried out by someone who directly manages or is responsible for other supervisees. Informal supervision is more of an opportunistic exchange. Usually it's short, it happens spontaneously in context of everyday work. It's limited to stories, narratives. It does not really give the room or space for reflection or challenge. It can come from all different sources: junior staff, admin staff. Clinical supervision is the most common form used in medical settings. It's discussing usually cases and how to manage them. It can take a variety of forms. It either happens in rounds, or sometimes with more complex cases. It's open for more reflective discussions and input from different team members. Um, it's mostly apparent during medical training years, but continues to happen throughout between peers and teams. Educational supervision occurs in the context of recognized training in order to establish learning needs and review progress. It involves facilitating learning, assessment of supervisees' performance, assisting with any learning needs, opportunities for career guidance. The most common issue seen here is that there's the tension between being a supervisor and being neutral, and attention of also being the person that conducts the assessment. Remedial supervision is when a regulatory agency determines that there are concerns about someone's performance. So similar to educational supervision, there is some assessment that occurs and reports. However, it is different that the supervisee is not offered basic training. They are offered what is called prescribed retraining. So they prescribe retraining for the supervisee, and it is not voluntary, it's mandatory. Professional supervision is the regular supervision that occurs between professionals to discuss specific cases. It is mostly common seen in counseling and psychotherapy, um, and less common seen in other practices. It usually focuses on reflecting on any emotions that are provoked by the client or the case, and what does these emotions mean or represent. Managerial supervision is usually carried out by someone that directly manages or is responsible for the supervisee. Similar to an educational supervision, managerial supervision may or may not take place within an educational framework and may or may not involve explicit assessment. In non medical literature, separation between managerial roles and clinical roles or supervision is often clear cut and not mixed, but in medicine, managerial supervision sometimes is inevitable in some circumstances. So, coaching, a lot of people have been hearing about the word coaching. It's a form of supervision that helps unlock the person's potential to maximize their own performance. It's a voluntary relationship, it's also confidential, similar to supervision, to other forms of supervision, and it's also limited to a number of tasks or one task at a time. For example, a person wants to work on leadership skills. In medicine, it takes more of a general view. Um, it helps people achieve personal and career fulfillment, and it does not, or they may consider coaching in medicine as any one-to-one learning relationship that does not involve any managerial supervision or assessment. There are essentials for effective supervisions. For example, it's very important that supervisor and supervisee agree on the practicalities and meeting arrangements. This includes the time, the frequency, the place, and it's very important to be able to conduct those meetings in a place where it's confidential, they're not interrupted. And for the seating arrangements, it's better if they don't have a desk between them where they can sit in comfortable chairs facing each other. Um, and the reason behind that is because this enables them to feel that there is no barriers between them and be able to communicate with each other verbally and non-verbally as well. Um, Supervision can happen through telephone or online, but there is value in in-person contact even if it's from time to time. It's important also to have boundaries, and this includes, for example, what kind of things we talk about and not talk about in session. And if we want to talk about personal things in session, how do these things fit with the cases or how they impact the person work? Each supervisor and supervisee has their own way of interacting with each other, but it's important to talk about these things if there's any boundaries or expectations. It's important also to have a healthy working alliance, um, where the supervisee is able to state their needs clearly to the supervisor, as we spoke before, and tells them what works and does not work for them. And for my personal experience, I had a supervisor where I was not able to work with. I felt that their way of supervision was not working with me, where I feel I shut down and I feel more of lecturing than giving me the space to bring in things and discuss. And when I communicated this to the supervisor, They were very accepting and started to meet me where I am at. And being a supervisor for me in the way that works best for me. If I have not spoken, I would have not benefited from supervision the way that I did. Also, it's very important to um talk about the session format. Um, for example, how would it look like the session? Will we talk about one case? Are we going to talk about different cases? Do we expect that when we talk about the case to have it written or just verbatim? And how we want to organize the context, and do we take notes, do we do not take notes, do we keep everything in mind? So there are different ways to approach supervision, but these are some hinters of how to make supervision effective. Thank you for listening to this lecture. It has been a pleasure to work with you. If you have any questions or comments, please remember to go to the discussion forum and post them there.